Benita Levin, live in Tel Aviv. Thank you very much for joining us. Time is of the essence. President Donald Trump is reiterating that the ceasefire with the Islamic Republic ends on Wednesday evening, Washington time, adding it's highly unlikely he will extend the ceasefire if a deal isn't reached by then. Vice President JD Vance and top U.S. officials are expected to leave for Pakistan ahead of a potential second round of talks with Iran on Tuesday. Earlier, the foreign ministry in Tehran insisting there were no plans for talks. Later, Iran saying it is planning to send a delegation to Islamabad. And now the Pakistanis are reportedly telling Reuters that they do think that talks will, in fact, happen. Many questions remain. Meanwhile, oil prices rose sharply again as the Strait of Hormuz remains essentially closed. In recent hours, Donald Trump taking to his social media network to make several lengthy posts, one of which says he is under no pressure to make a deal, although it will all happen relatively quickly. So for more, let's go live to our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim. He joins us from the White House in Washington. So many developments, so many questions. JD Vance heading to Pakistan with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner for round 2 of the ceasefire talks. Bizarre, Mike, to hear Iran initially suggesting they weren't sending a delegation to Islamabad. What is the latest on these talks? Are they actually happening? And who is expected to pitch up in the end?
I don't know. Do you remember our time as teenagers when you were thinking about going to a party and you said, well, if Bob's going, I'm not going. But if Jim's there, I want to talk to Jim. This is basically a life and death equivalent of that. And so now the Iranians, we understand from sources, are only going to come if JD Vance comes. Now, JD Vance has not left the White House, at least as of a couple of hours ago. A source familiar told us that the delegation would leave, quote unquote, soon. But contrary to President Trump's statement earlier today that they were just hours away from landing in Islamabad. The bottom line is there is a complete lack of trust still between the two sides. Another bottom line is that despite President Trump's rosy rhetoric around what he feels he has in hand in terms of a deal, it simply hasn't coalesced as of yet. Certainly doesn't mean it won't, but as of yet, the two sides still seem to be very, very far apart, especially with this clock ticking down to the end of the next ceasefire extension here, and President Trump already reiterating his previous threats to burn the whole house down if Iran doesn't come to the table here with something a whole lot better this time around. It does seem like both sides will eventually land in Islamabad for talks, whether it's a couple hours before the ceasefire, a couple other hours afterward. I don't think it really makes much difference. The thing is, it seems like both sides need to make some sort of progress here for the president and the administration to feel it's worthwhile to try to take this another round, because every time President Trump has to pull back on his threats to open up the door for more diplomacy, you lose face not only in the eyes of the public, but more importantly, in the eyes of the Iranians who think you're playing a chicken in a game you're going to lose. So, again, there has to be something to kind of back that up here. And if he can pull some concessions from the Iranians, that will give him that off-ramp to maybe extend the ceasefire and extend those talks a little bit. If he gets recalcitrance from the Iranians, his hands seem kind of tied at that point.
Those main sticking points still remain. One waits to see whether the big guns are there or it's a lower level delegation, if they can make any progress at all. Meanwhile, you talk about trust. The Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian saying his country maintains deep historical mistrust of the U.S. government, and he's criticizing what he calls unconstructive and contradictory signals from American officials, going on to slam the mixed messages you're describing from U.S. officials, adding Iranians do not submit to force. But the question remains who the decision maker is on the Iranian side. Is the president having real sway? Who is calling the shots at the end of the day when it comes to these negotiations out of the Islamic Republic?
Well, before I get that, two things can be true at the same time. Yes, we have heard mixed messaging from the administration, but on the flip side of that, the Iranians aren't ones to talk about trust and broken promises and all these other things. I mean, they've been doing it for decades now in terms of trying to sneak things in and playing, the shadow game that they play. So they're certainly not ones to lecture the American side on that. But this has been a question, the one you posed, it's been a question right from the get-go when President Trump first announced a month ago now, seemingly, when he woke up on a Sunday morning and went to the press and said, hey, we are talking to the Iranians and we think we can get a deal with this new regime that's in place. And the question swirled for a couple weeks. Who is this new regime? Who's leading it? Eventually, come to find that they're talking to the Speaker of the Parliament, others involved. But as time has gone on, and especially with the blockade that the Iranians put in the Strait of Hormuz, are you talking to the diplomats or are you talking to the IRGC? They're both hardliners, make no mistake, but it could make a big difference in the end if the administration's been talking to the wrong people all along.
Live from the White House with the latest, as always, thank you so much to our senior U.S. correspondent, Mike Wagenheim. Thanks, Mike. Now, for more on this very story, it's a pleasure to welcome Matthew Brodsky, chair of the American Center for Counter-Extremism, joining us now from Minneapolis. Thank you so much for your time. So Donald Trump has been taking to his social media network several times in recent hours. One of the posts I'd like to drill down on is his message that Israel never talked him into the war with Iran and that the results of October 7th added to his lifelong opinion that Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. Matthew, whatever one's view of the U.S. president, it's very clear this is a man who makes up his own mind. What is your sense of the narrative that Benjamin Netanyahu has managed to lure him on the warpath, so to speak?
Right. So on one hand, the claim is that Israel and Netanyahu pushed Trump into going to war. And at the same time, these same folks will argue that it's Trump who forced Netanyahu into a ceasefire. So they want to have it both ways. Now, of course, this is absurd. No one pushes Trump to do anything. But this fits all what you're seeing on Twitter, on X, and on Truth Social, all fits with an American political context in which, yes, you can see amongst mainstream Democrats that these are the kind of main talking points that they're using. That the war is a disaster, that it's been lost. Okay, that's mainstream Democrats. Trump, among Republicans, though, has had a problem with a very vocal minority of people in the podcast world, people like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens. These are not elected people representing Americans, such as, again, Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib on the left, on the Democrat side, but they're very loud. And Trump has finally decided that he was going to weigh in on the issue by calling out Tucker Carlson and calling out these people who are trying to say that Israel and Netanyahu has been leading America into war. He's finally decided that he's done with those people. And you can see this also reflected, incidentally, a day or two ago. Tucker Carlson's son, Buckley Carlson, was a deputy press secretary for JD Vance, our vice president, left his post or was gotten rid of somehow magically. Now, this is a portion of Republicans that Trump has finally decided to deal with. And this explains why he's talking about it, because whatever deal at the end that he gets, he's going to have to sell it. And if the people that are considered the far-right MAGA crowd are just not going to believe anything or stand by what he says and are, in fact, against it because they believe the type of things Tucker is saying, then that's going to be very hard for him because he'll be stuck with a minority or basically a voting majority of Republicans, people like me, who would say this is a good deal what Trump is doing, provided we get to a good deal. So this is all about domestic American politics for Trump.
So talking of getting to a good deal, as you know, JD Vance supposedly heading the U.S. team in Pakistan. The Iranians are in fact going to be there. We're hearing it's not clear after those ludicrous denials earlier in the day about their participation in round 2 of the talks in Islamabad. Matthew, the gaps remain wide. Realistically, do you see the ceasefire holding. What do you think will unfold if these talks do, in fact, happen in the Pakistani capital on Tuesday?
I think the kind of threats Trump has been issuing is talking the language of the Middle East. I think no country understands it better than Israel, that you can win on the battlefield, but there's a problem when you utterly destroy or defeat militarily your enemies, and they don't actually concede that they've been defeated. And that's what's happening again with Iran. That's happened with Hamas, with Hezbollah. Countries that lose think that they can dictate the terms for peace. Currently, the group of people that we're meeting with, the regime foreign ministry type folks that are left, are not the ones calling the shots. It's Vahidi, it's the IRGC. They're the ones in control. So we're not meeting even right now with the people that are empowered to make a deal. That's unfortunate. I think Trump has to go and do something militarily, kinetically, whether it's bridges, power plants, none of which are war crimes, all of which are legal in terms of what you do to enemies during wartime. I think you'll see that. And then you might see afterwards the United States continue with maximum economic pressure, keeping their military presence there and taking on targets of opportunity, because the Iranian regime, what's left of it, needs to understand that they, in fact, hold no cards, because in reality, they don't hold any cards.
Given what you were saying earlier on in our discussion, what is your sense of the support Donald Trump would have from the American public if the war were to resume?
So this is where he has, of course, as I've mentioned, stepped in to deal with the talker-type far-right crowd, because that is having an impact on Republicans. Now, the reality is Republicans still are very much behind the president. Democrats, it really doesn't matter what. We can see from even Rahm Emanuel, who's Jewish, who's going to be probably running for president just over the weekend, is making the kind of passes where you have to claim to be very anti-Israel in order to be a mainstream Democrat. With Trump, he's going to need to solidify the Republican base. The Republican base will be with him, provided he's able to show that there is, we won militarily, that setting back Iran weeks, months, years, these are all very important things, and that the United States has a plan going forward. I think he will be able to do that. As always, at the end of the day, the biggest struggle with the Trump administration happens to be its comms strategy. So that is going to be the issue, not the actual tangible results of what's been achieved on the ground.
Matthew Brodsky, live from Minneapolis. Good to hear your insights as always. Thank you very much for being with us on this Breaking News edition.
Pleasure.